Hello, everyone, and welcome to the interview series. And today I have with us Dr. Roy Baumeister, who is a social psychologist, a professor of psychology at Florida State University, and author of several books. And today we'll be talking about your book, Willpower, which I absolutely loved. And so you say that it's one of the greatest human strengths. Why do you say that willpower is the greatest human strength?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is that it seems to work like a strength. It operates like a muscle. So the analogy is there. In terms of being the greatest, people come up with titles to sell books and so on. But to a scientist, you say, okay, can you make a case for it? Can you provide some evidence that this is a great or possibly the greatest? It certainly produces so many benefits in life. I mean, we were stunned just at the range and diversity of positive consequences that come from having good self-control. If you assess children's self-control and then follow them through life, the ones higher self-control of children do better in almost every sphere in adulthood. They're more popular in the sense that their teachers like them better in school. They have better relationships, more stable marriages, more friends. They're more successful in school. They get better grades. They get higher test scores. They earn more money when they get out in the world. So, better, more stable careers. Mental and physical health are both better. They are saner. They live longer. They have fewer problems in the sense of money problems. Are less likely to get arrested, unplanned pregnancies, and so on. And in the far end of life, they live longer. So, what's not to love about that?
Yeah, that's a
Not,
long list.
yeah, not very many. Yeah, I'd like to say that psychology has found two traits that really produce better success in life. I mean, forget about the social side of things, but just success in a broad range of endeavors. The other one is intelligence. And, well, intelligence is very good too, but that would be the main competition, and we can't really improve intelligence in a lasting way. Where it does appear that you can improve your self-control because it's like a muscle and you can exercise it to make it stronger. So I think that makes a fair case.
Okay, and so are we all born with different levels of willpower?
I don't think so. I've puzzled about this, and I've been I'm not a genetics expert and stuff like that. And back when I went to college, nobody gave any heed to biological basis of things. They didn't think personality was something you're born with. Since then, it's become clear that a lot of things have a genetic aspect, but very little goes directly from genes to behavior. And almost everybody on both sides who's knowledgeable now says the genes and the environment interact, and the environment turns on some gene effects and turns off others, and there are lots of genes. Moreover, in terms of the willpower, the energy resource, that seems to be tied to the energy in your system, and so we'd have to argue some people actually have more glucose, more chemical energy inside them, and it might be true, but I'd be skeptical to go that far. What it really seems like is that people with good self-control use it better. They have the same resource, but they manage it better. We had a big surprise a couple of years ago in a study where we were tracking people's everyday desires and how often, including measuring how often do you resist the desires. And we got them moment by moment rather than just asking people to generalize. Well, the people who'd scored high in self-control, we thought, okay, self-control helps you resist desires. That's how they're successful. They're going to report more desiring. But it was statistically significant in the opposite direction. They were less likely to say they resisted their desires. And so that kind of threw us for a loop, and we went back and looked what happened. And it's more they're staying out of trouble. They're not using self-control to bail them out. I mean, you think of like somebody who's quit drinking, and then their friends want to go to a bar, and they say, "Well, I'll just go and have a Diet Coke." But then you're in there, and it smells good, and people are having fun, and then you have more trouble resisting it. And the person with good self-control says, "No, I won't join you. I'll meet you at the ice cream parlor or something else, but not going to meet you in the bar if the bar is the problem." And setting up life to run automatically seems to be how done it, and that's been a big shift. We were just starting to talk about that in the willpower book, because that new insight was coming. It's not that you have willpower to resist the crucial temptations. I mean, maybe a little bit of that, but it's more setting up your life effectively with good routines and habits so that it can run smoothly. You stay out of trouble, break bad habits, form good ones, and that's what produces the best results in the long run. Some of the biggest effects, people associate self-control with dieting and so on, and there's a statistically positive effect, but it's a weak one as statisticians judge those things. Yeah, people with good self-control are a little bit better at dieting, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into dieting that's beyond your direct control. The big effects we find with work and school, that people with good self-control do a lot better in that. And that's not that, they have the willpower to stay up all night the night before the paper's due to get it done in a big rush. They just don't get into that situation. They develop work habits, and so they never get to the point where it's due tomorrow and I need to stay up all night.
That's interesting. So you said that willpower is affected by one's level of glucose. Now, what are some foods that have a lot of glucose and that can sustain a sort of form of glucose so that people can have desirable form or a desirable bank of willpower throughout the day?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm a little bit outside my area here. And glucose, is sort of a name for sugar, but it doesn't refer just to sugar. It's the chemical in the bloodstream that carries the body's energies. So whatever energy you get from eating food, when it's put into your bloodstream, I believe that it does in the form of glucose. Now, to get a quick burst, in the laboratory, we do give people sugar. It's partly we started doing in our experiments is we give people a glass of lemonade at the start of the experiment, and you can mix it either with a diet sweetener, which has no glucose, or with sugar, and we do it complete double blind, so neither the experimenter nor the person knows what's in there, and it's just sort of a thing that happens on the side. And the people who get sugar then don't show as much of a depleted willpower effect when we run down their self-control as other people. Now, there's a certain irony in using sugar to improve people's self-control, because obviously a lot of people are using self-control to try to not eat sugar, but we only have people for a short time in the lab, so we give them sugar that's got plenty of glucose, but it's a very quick up and down. If you have small kids and you have Halloween, the day after Halloween, the daycare and the elementary school teachers say this is like the worst day of the year, because they all had a big high and then a big crash the next day, and they're all cranky. So what you'd want to eat is something with a glycemic index that goes a much slower thing. So protein is to be recommended. If you want to work all afternoon, have a chicken sandwich or something for lunch that. Or tofu if you're a vegetarian, I guess, but some protein that you'd burn over a longer period of time. It doesn't have the fast up and the fast crash. But again, for the laboratory, people just come in for 20 minutes or 30 for an experiment. We gotta get the effects going fast. So I recommend. I sometimes tell my students, before your final exam, maybe you want to have a real Coke rather than a Diet Coke. But in general, I don't recommend sugar for that. And sugar has other questionable effects as far as I know, but I'm not a nutritionist. Getting a healthy diet and a good night's sleep seem to do a lot toward enabling self-control to work better. Our new data we're just getting in are really showing a surprisingly strong effect of sleep. And if anything, it's quality of sleep more than quantity seems to make a difference. It goes both ways. People with good trait self-control seem to sleep better. They sleep a little tiny bit longer, but it's a much better quality of sleep. And I don't know why that is. There's several possible reasons. Maybe they're not drinking as much alcohol and doing other things. Maybe not staying up as late arguing with their romantic partner. all that stuff, it does interfere with sleep, and all that stuff they do, poor self-control goes with those things. Anyway, self-control improves sleep, but it also works the other way, that getting good sleep helps people have less ego depletion. Why that is, there are a bunch of theories. I'm also not a brain expert, but there's some people have been arguing that during sleep the brain moves around its backup fuel supplies, and the brain kind of assesses itself. And if you've been running a lot, it says, "Oh, well, the motor cortex is doing a lot of work these days, so it puts a little more energy in there for the next day." And by the same token, if you've been doing a lot of self-control, it says, "Well, this part of the brain that manages self-control may need some extra glycogen," I guess is the name of the backup storage. So that's one theory, and there's some evidence for it. I can't vouch for it, but I can vouch for good sleep increasingly showing improves self-control.
It's interesting how you say that there's kind of a catch-22. It's like, in order to get good sleep, you have to have good willpower, but in order to have good willpower, you have to go to sleep. So it's kind of like a loop in some sense.
Yes, yeah, it isn't quite a catch. It goes together. The closest thing to the catch-22, which I think we talked about in the book, is with food, because you need food to have good self-control, but you need good self-control to resist eating if you're trying to go on a diet. It's one of the reasons that dieting is difficult and often in the long run unsuccessful. And we're also learning managing something where you continue to do a little of it is much more difficult than quitting. So when people are addicted to cigarettes or alcohol or whatever, it's more of a challenge to keep going and having some than to just say, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to have any more alcohol. But you can't do that with food. You have to eat. So you're stuck with the more difficult version. And every day you're eating something, and every day you got to decide how much and when to stop and what are you going to eat. But you can't. People quit smoking or drinking, and it just sort of fades out of their life, and it's a bit of a struggle at first, and then they forget about it, and life is fine without it. With food, you can't do that.
So, what are some ways that people can increase the amount of willpower that they have? Or you said willpower is like a muscle. So, what are some what are some exercises that one can do to increase the amount of willpower that they have?
All right. The exercise, the essence of it is where you're using some kind of mental effort to change things, to resist an impulse, to substitute one response from another. In our experiments, we pick stuff that's sort of arbitrary and meaningless to avoid other theoretical confounds that make the interpretation. So these aren't necessarily the best ones to use for yourself, but just to give you an example of how they work. In some, we take, if people are right-handed, we say, well, for the next week, we want you to use your left hand for a bunch of things, like opening doors or drinking from a cup or brushing your teeth or the computer mouse. And so, you have a habit of doing it. So there's always the impulse to use your right hand, and you have to override that and use your left hand. The first study actually we did that worked like this, posture. We told people, whenever you think about it, sit up straight, stand up straight. So that's something, just making a change to your behavior. You have to sort of be aware of yourself and then make an adjustment to sit up straight. And that worked. And after 2 weeks, we brought people back to the laboratory and gave them self-control tests that had nothing to do with posture. But the people who'd done these exercises did better because of these. So again, the idea is changing your behavior in a small way. What I suggest for people in their, let me give another example of what we use is changing how you speak. And people can do that and say, well, maybe I'm going to stop saying swear words around the house, or speak in complete sentences. We sometimes give people other fairly arbitrary things like don't say yeah or nope or something. You can only say yes and no. Only speak in complete sentences. Again, we pick arbitrary ones, but pick some that would have some value. I saw last year at the commencement, some military guy was giving a speech to the graduating seniors, and giving him advice, and he said, "Well, why don't you start by making your bed every day when you get up? Make your bed, then you'll have got something accomplished." And the military enforces these little rules because they don't want the barracks to look sloppy and stuff like that. But people who spend a long time in the military have good self-control and self-discipline, and these little things do strengthen it. And the making the bed, I don't make my bed, but I could recommend it. It would be the sort of change that would be a good thing to practice a little discipline, and that strengthens the muscle. People usually interview me around New Year's and say, "What's wrong with New Year's resolutions? Why don't they work?" They're mostly self-control demands, and they're ways to improve yourself. So they're highly relevant, and I believe in self-improvement. That's a great way to go through life. But the fallacy of the New Year's resolution is people try to do them all at once. And since you have an amount of willpower, energy, you put the energy in one, and it leaves you less for doing the other. So they all work against each other. So what I recommend is go ahead and make the New Year's resolutions, but do them in sequence rather than all at once, and start with the easiest one so you can actually succeed at that. And then the first one might be making your bed or cleaning up the dishes after dinner, or something you can make a concrete thing. Put off the more difficult ones like not smoking or developing an exercise program, something like that. Put off those until you've already strengthened your self-control muscle by doing a couple of the easy ones. And after you finish the easy one, then go on to the next one. And also during periods when you're under a lot of strain at work or something like that, and you don't have any extra willpower for these things, well, then just coast on those for a while. You don't backslide, preferably. If you've gotten that you clean up the dishes after dinner, don't just say, "Well, it's a stressful week, so I'm not going to do that." If you can, keep that going. Because remember, you want to develop the habits, and once they become habits, they're much easier. They don't take the mental energy to make you execute that behavior.
Okay. So do you think that people are becoming more weak-willed these days due to modern conveniences?
It's very hard to compare across historical eras. I know there have been respectable arguments going both ways, and actually both arguments might have some validity. Because maybe the Victorian period was sort of the peak, and we certainly associate them with very strict discipline and rules and a lot of morality. And so maybe we've come down a bit since then. It's hard to know. I think the self-esteem movement made parents reluctant to criticize their children or to enforce rules. And I think that was an unfortunate effect there. And it doesn't even really work. If you really want self-esteem, it helps to give children clear and strict rules and enforce them, and then praise the child when the child lives up to the rules. That's a strong basis for self-esteem. Just telling the kid that whatever you do is great and you're perfect is not. The kids see through that, and it's not a good path to self-esteem in the long run. Anyway, whether people are changing, people are always changing a little bit to some degree, and the impressions of scholars probably change more than actual behavior. We're seeing, we've certainly seen an increase in temptations. We talked about this somewhat in the book. You can ruin your budget for the year with a 10-minute online shopping spree. So the dangers are there, but that doesn't mean the people are actually weaker. But other people are saying, young people today, the parents are coddling them more and afraid to criticize, and so people don't grow up with as much strength of character or resilience. On the other hand, there are signs that young people suddenly are drinking and taking fewer drugs, drinking less, taking fewer drugs, and so on. So there's some signs that look like good control. On the other hand, they've got more anxiety and other concerns. It's hard to get a strong fix on how people are changing for better or worse. I think what's the most important development in society is the increased accountability. in the olden days, when you lived in a small society or a small village or a small hunting group or whatever, gatherer group, everybody knew everybody's business. And if you did something bad, that would haunt you for a long time. So there was a lot of incentive not to do that. Then we went through a phase where people lived in bigger and bigger cities, and the social bonds aren't that strong. And if you do something really bad, you can just move to a new place and meet all new people and get over it. So the penalties for misbehaving dropped, and by some accounts, misbehavior increased considerably. But now there are being more cameras everywhere, online ratings, and keeping record, and so it's technology is making up for the creating, in a sense, that global village mentality that used to be enforced by living in a small group where everybody knew everybody's business all the time. So that's going to enforce people to be more cautious, and we constantly see these stories where people say something in an email or do something online, and then disaster ensues for a long time. I never meant that, but it takes a long time to live that down. So I think people are going to start to become really cautious about that, and that again will enforce more use of self-control.
Oh, great. So in your book, you say that self-control along with intelligence are both personal qualities that predict positive outcomes. Now, in other books, the authors have their own factors that predict sort of positive outcomes. So, for example, in the book Personality by Daniel Nettle, he talks about conscientiousness and how it's a determining factor of success. In the book Grit, Angela Duckworth talks about passion and perseverance, and also Carol Dweck talks about having a growth mindset in her book. Now, how do all of these parts of psychology tie in together with regards to positive outcomes, or are they all just separate?
The one is separate, the other two are not. Conscientiousness is mostly self-control. It's one of the so-called Big Five personality traits constructed by giant statistical analyses. So a variety of different measures go there, but self-control appears to be the main driving force in it. The other aspects are like being traditional and so on. I would guess they have less to do in terms of its benefits. So conscientiousness is mostly self-control. And grit is about 2/3 self-control, and I think that's the part that's doing the work there too. So those are essentially saying the same thing I'm saying with using a different term, a different twist on it. The mindset aspect is something different, and yes, Dweck has a nice program of work there, and having beliefs in getting better and improvement and so on. Those seem to have independence. That is not essentially a self-control thing, but the other two are.
Okay, no, that's great. And so I know there's a test to see how gritty one is or how conscientious you are. Now, is there a sort of formal assessment or formal test where someone can see how much willpower they have?
Yes, and I think both the conscientiousness and the grit tests are basically based on a self-control measure. The standard measure used for trait self-control is the one June Tangney and colleague with some help from me developed about 10 years ago. It's been used in well over 1,000 published studies, and quite a few, I'm sure, unpublished ones as well. So that is one standard measure. Now, this is for measuring your trait self-control. You phrased your question in terms of how much willpower they have. And again, that's technically a little bit of a different question. My thinking these days, and it continues to be revised, so I'm not sure about this, but my thinking is everyone has about the same amount of willpower. It's just the people with high self-control use it better. They use it more planfully and effectively and so on. And so they make fewer demands. They do a lot more with the same resource. If we trace willpower back again to glucose as the body's chemical energy supply, well, everybody on average has pretty much the same, I should think, and nobody's in danger of running out. But people allocate it differently, focus it. Again, the key seems to be using it to break bad habits and form good ones, anticipate problems, plan, avoid temptations. These are all things that mark the high self-control life.
Wonderful. And your book was written about 5 years ago. And are there any new discoveries that you found out now that you would have liked to include in your book?
Oh well, we're just starting to submitting for publication some new results. Everything in self-control, we've sort of focused, especially in the research, on managing, exerting self-control to resist temptation, make yourself do things. But one thing that seems to have two things that seem to have a huge effect that we hadn't anticipated are: one, conflict with others seems to be incredibly draining of your willpower. The people who had arguments, and can be with your romantic partner or people at work or whatever, but more conflict really seems to drain people, and lack of sleep. There was just a huge difference. We looked at who's reporting severe levels of ego depletion, of just feeling exhausted and overwhelmed by stuff. The people who said they had a good quality sleep last night and they haven't had a big argument with anybody in the last 24 hours, they almost never reported it. 1% of their reports were at that high level, whereas almost half, and that's a whopping statistical difference, people who said, I didn't sleep well and I had a interpersonal conflict in the last 24 hours. That is just a huge difference. So I think once again, the importance of understanding the interpersonal context. It's not just something that happens inside the single mind, but psychology, a lot of it occurs between people. So that's one big new development, and so that's the most important right now.
That's interesting. When you talk about sleep, how many hours were they getting, the ones who reported lower levels of, I guess, conflict?
We measured those independently, and there were thousands of people, so we had all the range. Hours of sleep, it seems to be 7 hours seems to be enough. There's no benefit to self-control to getting more than 7 hours of sleep. But it was the quality of sleep that mattered more than the quantity. It's kind of surprising in a way. Self-control, you can manage to make yourself in bed. You can't use self-control to make yourself have good quality sleep. So you have more direct control over the quantity than the quality, but self-control contributes more to quality than to quantity, and it pays back that it's the good quality sleep that really seems to produce the good effects.
Wow, that's very interesting. Quality of sleep matters dramatically. All right, well, so for yourself, are there any other books or any other publications that you will be posting out soon? And in addition to that, where can people find or connect with you?
Well, I have a website. People can just look up my name. In terms of books, there are always more things coming out, but I think about next year, 2018, and then the year after, I'm hoping to have a couple of big important books come out. One on the nature of the self, and the other one, well, I'll keep a little bit secret, but
okay.
We're calling it The Rule of Bad. So after that, I think those will be cool.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, that would be that's very great. I'm thankful for you to be here today, Dr. Roy Baumeister, and yeah, thank you so much for taking this time to have this interview.
Okay. Well, thank you for the interview, and I appreciate the opportunity.